So thanks for being here. I want to make an appeal. I'd like to appeal to the spirit of Pennsylvania in each of us. As you know, today many people are going to gather in different parts of Pennsylvania to protest the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. They're also going to call attention to the need that all of us have to rededicate ourselves to the commonwealth we deserve. A commonwealth that is decent, that is fair, and is equal to everybody. These demonstrations will remind us that we have a lot to do in this regard. Demonstrations are also a reminder that our democracy is a continual work in progress. So as people gather today, they're going to be defining once again that democracy anew. At its best, our democracy is one that celebrates the rights of citizens to express themselves in demonstrations like these. It's also a democracy that celebrates respect. So to the folks out there who are demonstrating, as you exercise your rights today, do it in a way that honors democracy. Do it in a way that reaffirms its noble potential. And do it in a way that celebrates the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Speak your mind and speak it with peace. In doing so, you will be expressing both the spirit of democracy, but you'll also be expressing the true spirit of Pennsylvania that lies in each of us. Again, yesterday was a challenging day for the Commonwealth. Many Pennsylvanians joined together to speak out against injustice, and they made their voices heard peacefully. In some of our cities, however, including Philadelphia, Harrisburg, and Pittsburgh, some people took advantage of these peaceful protests, and they incited violence and looting. I worked closely with these cities and with others. I activated the Commonwealth Response Coordination Center, and I signed a disaster declaration to provide any assistance necessary to the affected cities. And our state police helped in response, along with our Capitol Police right here in Harrisburg. Working with the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency, and you'll hear from Randy in just a minute, and the Department of Military and Veterans Affairs, at the request of some municipalities, we activated National Guard members, again, to keep our communities safe. And I will continue to work with Mayors Kenny, Peduto, Pappenfuss, and others around the Commonwealth to make sure that everyone is able to make their voices heard while we're keeping everyone safe. Again, I urge everyone in these demonstrations to be peaceful. I urge everyone to have respect for the communities and our neighbors. And I urge all of us to continue to call out injustice. We should be doing that. I want to thank our first responders. Most of all, I don't want to lose sight of why we're here. I want to once again offer my condolences to the family and friends of George Floyd. I want to offer my condolences to everyone, everywhere who suffers oppression, racism, and violence. Every day, in every corner of our society, we need to ask ourselves, we need to work constantly to eliminate racism. Ask ourselves how we can do that. This means we need to do our part to address it. From the smallest thought to the biggest action, everywhere, here in Pennsylvania and everywhere. So please be safe today. And I'm going to turn it over to Director Padfield to talk about PEMA. Randy.
Thank you, Governor Wolf. I'd like to first start off by echoing Governor Wolf's comments regarding George Floyd, his family, and his friends. No words can express the emotions people feel when they see what happened to him. We must work together as a common society across all races, religions, ethnic backgrounds to bring an end to these senseless acts. Yesterday afternoon, the staff at the Commonwealth Response Coordination Center, which was already activated for the COVID-19 crisis, watched as some of the peaceful protests across the state began to turn violent. Obviously, under the leadership of the governor, we immediately added additional staffing to begin coordinating contingency plans to assist those that are most affected in those jurisdictions. Overnight, our staff worked with the National Guard to mobilize and to stand by if needed for assistance today and throughout the evening hours tonight, We also worked with our state agency partners in surrounding states to ascertain the availability of additional law enforcement assistance or other assistance should it be needed in the unlikely event that protests escalate today. As the governor had indicated, he had issued a disaster proclamation, and that gives us a number of tools that we have at our disposal to be able to assist in being able to respond to these jurisdictions and assist them. Here at Pima, we will continue to work with our county and city partners throughout the day and overnight to address any additional needs as citizens of the Commonwealth exercise their rights to peaceful demonstration and to protect property and lives. Many of these jurisdictions that we deal with on a daily basis, including the city of Philadelphia, obviously the city of Harrisburg and Pittsburgh, have robust mutual aid plans in place and have plans in place to be able to deal with these types of situations. So we really stand at the ready to be able to augment them if they need any additional assistance should things escalate. As I've said in the past, from my position here as the Pima director, we usually plan for the worst, but we hope to expect the best. We hope that this is what happens tonight across the state, that individuals have the ability to exercise their right to peaceful protest without the fear of violence or property destruction. Thank you. I'll turn it back over to Governor Roll.
Now, we'll take questions. Let's keep them on topic. Yeah, Angela.
I was hoping you could give some more specifics about number of PSP troopers, number of National Guard members who are ready.
Randy, why don't you take that question?
And also, if you could talk a little bit about what kind of guidance you are giving them in terms of responding if they do see a situation that's potentially troubling, how to be respectful of, in particular, of human life and not to inflame, but rather to tamp down.
And that's a very good question. So I'll provide actually some framing for that. So we look at the resource requests that come in from the counties, but we also are proactive in the fact that some counties, things may kind of creep up that they weren't anticipating. So it's really a dual-pronged approach. So we have resource requests in from the city of Philadelphia right now. We also have resource requests in from Montgomery County to assist them with National Guard support. We've also looked at a number of different options. So through the disaster declaration process, we actually reached out to all the surrounding states, with the exception of Ohio, to see if we can get state-to-state mutual aid. But unfortunately, many of the other states are dealing with a very similar problem set. So it's very difficult for them to lend their law enforcement and other resources to us. So we have National Guard requests right now for Montgomery County and also for the city of Philadelphia. We're also standing up additional National Guard in the western part of the state, should they be needed for the city of Pittsburgh or Allegheny County. And that is completely proactive. We actually have no official resource request, but we're just putting them there just in case. As far as numbers, those numbers are changing, so I really don't want to quote the numbers at this point in time. State Police is also sending assistance to Philadelphia, and I defer the question regarding numbers of people to, or troopers that are going down there to State Police. As far as rules of engagement is what we like to call, as far as level setting those, we actually have a synchronization call or a call to be able to discuss that across all disciplines so that everybody is operating from a standard set of rules of engagement. The National Guard is not going to necessarily be out on the front lines. It's really the law enforcement in those jurisdictions that really have the day-to-day coordination with the citizens, and they know their jurisdictions best, and they know how to interact with those folks, and there's specialized training. So really the National Guard resources are really to augment other things that maybe would tie up law enforcement in those jurisdictions that they do not have the ability to do because they have to commit so many personnel to be able to kind of monitor the protests. So that's really the goal of the Guard, is to really not to engage in those types of situations. We work very closely with General Corelli to be able to discuss that. And like I said, we're making sure that we have a call coming up here to be able to synchronize that so everybody has level set expectations on really what rules they are to play by.
Just as a follow-up, can you give us some examples of what kind of things the National Guard would augment if they were to go into Philadelphia?
So it may be things such as access control, traffic control points, those types of things that normally may tie up law enforcement personnel, and that would relieve them to be able to actually be more engaged with the protests. So it will be those types of things, any other support that the city would need or that the local jurisdiction would need. So it's really augmenting their force to be able to relieve them of some of the things that maybe they aren't necessarily needed in, but still need to be covered, if that makes sense.
Following up on Angela's, if I could, will state police and Capitol Police still kind of be deployed in Harrisburg as a matter of course? I know there was some concern yesterday that as things escalated throughout the afternoon and evening in Harrisburg, it was kind of state policing resources on the front lines that were part of that escalation.
And some of that's predicated by local mutual aid. So what happened in Harrisburg was usually, and they have mutual aid plans that they practice on a regular basis and they exercise on a regular basis. So that is normally seamless. So they're working with the individuals, especially from a law enforcement perspective, that they have a similar set of parameters that they're dealing with. So how that evolves and usually how our agency gets involved is usually when those mutual aid agreements are exhausted and there is a need for additional resources outside of those county level or local agency mutual aid agreements.
Any other questions? Sure.
Yeah, just because you guys have this statewide vantage point here in Harrisburg.
Are you going to, yes, you want Randy?
For whoever can best handle it.
Okay.
Because you have this vantage point, I'm just curious if you could give us your best perspective about where the violence and the property damage was worst last night. Do you have a sense for that?
I don't. Randy, do you have a sense?
We normally get involved in the property damage, but usually we may not have optics on that for a number of days until they have an assessment. But we know specifically, obviously, in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. And looking at just anecdotally from what we've seen, we believe that most likely Philadelphia had the most property damage, but there was also significant damage in Pittsburgh as well. And really any peaceful protest has the ability and the potential to become violent. We hope it doesn't, but we really monitor all of the protests across the state, even in smaller jurisdictions.
Could you share any intelligence that you have? I mean, you came out here appealing for calm and safety today. Could you share any intelligence that you have that caused you to want to come out here and make that appeal today? Is there anything specific that you know about the protests that are planned today or are likely to happen?
Just that there are protests planned in different communities across the state, small and large, in very different places. So I just thought it was a good thing to remind ourselves. Again, if you look at the demonstrations yesterday, I think most people were there to do the thing that they wanted to do, which was protest injustice, which is entirely appropriate. So I think what I wanted to do was just reinforce that and say, let's all do that. Let's make sure that we keep these protests on topic and say we're here because we have a real problem with the injustices that exist here in Pennsylvania and across the country.
I just one more on that. Just that, like a lot of people, I was just tuned into CNN and news coverage last night to see what was going on as things were happening. And one of the things that was striking about it was that you kept hearing over and over again that people in these jurisdictions were saying, I think Mayor Kenny called it a ragtag band of thugs. I'm paraphrasing. Other governors talked about outside agitators that they blamed the violence on, and you steered clear of that today.
Well, because I don't know. I heard the same thing that Mayor Kenny said, that this was the work of outsiders. I don't have any information, and Randy doesn't either. That's true. We don't know.
Yeah. Okay. And
No,
I mean,
go.
just the other thing that I have thought about in this, you know, racism is something that we unfortunately live with in America, like the wallpaper here. You know, it's always there, and there are times when there's an incident that triggers it to move it to the forefront of everybody's consciousness, like a punch in the face. And but I'm just curious about this. Can you explain, because we have an incident now that has triggered this wave of protest across the country, is there anything that you are thinking about from this is early in the game, but is there anything that you've begun thinking about from a policy standpoint that would say, you know, here's what we need to be doing in Pennsylvania to continue to attack this problem?
Yeah, and I haven't just started thinking about this. I think that it is a problem for every American and every Pennsylvanian if we're not all free, if some of us are not free, if some of us don't have a fair system of justice, if some of us don't feel it's working for us, then neither the system of justice nor our democracy is working for any of us, because it can always be taken away. So we have got to work, and this is one of the things that I have taken very seriously right from the start, not just the last couple of days. And I think all of us, all Americans and all Pennsylvanians, and that's why I said what I said. These demonstrations are right on the mark. We need to protest injustice. We need to do something about it. And we can't think, yeah, it's just part of the American landscape. It has been, unfortunately, but we've got to change it. Yes, Angela.
Governor, I'm wondering if, based off of what you've seen with police responses in Harrisburg and Philly and Pittsburgh, whether you think that, generally speaking, law enforcement has cut that really fine line in its response in respecting protesters versus responding to any incidents, or whether anything that you've seen so far has worried you or concerned you about law enforcement's response.
I'm really proud of what the way law enforcement that I have seen all across the state has handled this. They are in a really difficult situation, and they're trying to do their best to balance the needs of keeping people safe and allowing people the freedom to protest. And that's really tough, as we've seen. But I think they've handled themselves, everything I've seen, really well. Yeah.
Circling back to Charlie's question, are there things that, you said you've been thinking about responses to this? Are there things that are within your control that you could take to maybe, in terms of state policing, to improve?
Yeah, and let me just say, I think there's a whole lot that I can do, but I have been working on things to try to address this right from the time I took this office. In fact, it's one of the reasons I ran for this office, because we cannot have a healthy democracy when racism and oppression exists and injustice. So yeah, a lot of different ways, and you can look at some early successes. Our prison population is actually down by thousands. We've closed prisons. We have more people of color in positions of responsibility than ever before in Pennsylvania, and we still have more work to do, and I'm alive to that. We have problems in terms of the way we support some of the basic infrastructure in Pennsylvania, like schools. We do not provide the resources to the very places that need them most, and this often works to the detriment of communities of color. So we have a lot of work to do, but I am pledged to continue to do my best to say I am not going to accept a society where racism exists. I am not going to accept it. I'm going to do everything I can, and I have hopefully 8 years to do that, 2.5 more years, and I will keep working on that. But in the meantime, I think what happened in Minneapolis and what's happening with these demonstrations is that we're seeing we still have a lot of work to do.
Well, in terms of because this is I think as acute the conversation has been in this state since the killing of a teenager in Pittsburgh. There's legislation in the General Assembly that would update use of force guidelines statewide, update that statute, do some other things. Is that something that you think they should take a closer look at?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what you're talking about, but I think all those things, to the extent that they help us build a society that actually recognizes that we have got to have, we've got to be fair and decent to each other, all of us, every single one of us. And to the extent, whatever piece of legislation you're talking about in my opinion, moves us further in that direction, I'll support it. Yeah, Angela.
This one is for Director Council. I'm wondering if you can elaborate a little bit on the rules of engagement that you talked about earlier, understanding that there's a call to figure that out today, but I'm wondering if you could give us some examples, like what are the National Guard armed with when they go out? Do they have pepper spray? Are they authorized to use it? Can you give us a little bit more detail about that type of response, if they are to see something that's...
Sure. So that's what we're currently working out right now. There are different components of the National Guard, and I'd really defer the real technical questions to really General Corelli or someone from the National Guard. But what we take a look at is what is their normal training, and then we take a look at, we want to make sure that everybody's expectations are being met. So we do not want to put the National Guard, if they're not prepared for that mission, to be able to be on the front lines of, civil unrest. We don't want to put them in that position, because that puts them in a very vulnerable position that they're not trained to be in. But the challenge is local law enforcement may look at them and say, and think that they are trained in that position. So really what we're looking at and what we're working through right now is what the expectations are across the board. And as working with local law enforcement, it's working with everyone in the emergency management structure to be able to make sure that everybody understands the expectations. And sometimes that's a negotiation back and forth because the local jurisdictions have one idea of what they would like to use the National Guard for, and they may not be trained for that specific purpose. So that's why we have these coordination calls or coordination meetings to be able to lay that out. So I don't want to speak to the specifics of what they're going to have with them and those types of things, because I think a lot of that's going to be predicated on the information that's going to be discussed here in a very short time.
Just to follow up on the National Guard, you said that you had a resource request in Philadelphia.
Correct.
And a resource request from Montgomery County. I mean, I think we all understand Pittsburgh and Philadelphia are our largest cities, and there's potential for violence with large protests there. But how about Montgomery County? What is that specifically for? I think we heard things about the King of Prussia Mall last night. Is that it, or are there other things?
That is potentially one of the resource requests we're looking at for Montgomery County, and that was an issue last night. We were made aware of that late into the evening hours. So they're concerned, obviously, with a resurgence there this evening. And one of the other challenges is that I discussed the mutual aid agreements that occur. So when we see large flare-ups like this, there are mutual aid departments that come in from other counties or neighboring jurisdictions, and sometimes that leaves those jurisdictions without law enforcement, or it leaves those jurisdictions without other personnel to be able to do or accomplish kind of some of the support. So they're the things that we take a look at. Every resource request we receive, we actually work with whoever the requester is to really define what those requirements are, because and it's more based on the capabilities they're looking for, because there's a number of ways that we can get the capabilities. It may not be the National Guard, they may not be the best resource. So they're the things that we look at when we receive those.
And just one quick for Governor Wolf.
Sure.
Do you, this may be a crystal ball question, but I mean, do you have any expectation for how long this emergency declaration that you signed last night pertaining to the George Floyd protests will last?
I hope not very long, because I hope the protests and the violence doesn't last very long. So I will relieve this or eliminate this as quickly as I can. We want to stay safe.
Yeah. It is actually indefinite though, right?
I think it's 3 months,
Okay.
but it's indefinite up until 3 months, and then you can, as I've done with the COVID and with the opioid, you can extend it.
But so this is a wait and see proposition then?
Yes.
When things calm down on the protest front, then you might relieve it?
I will,
Yeah.
not might. Angela?
Yes, I wanted to clarify one quick point on the National Guard. Are they only going into jurisdictions when they are requested, or are you proactively sending National Guard members into places, say, like Pittsburgh, that have not yet officially asked?
Only when requested.
Okay.
So we take a look at a dual-pronged approach. So one of the challenges that we have is that if a jurisdiction requests resources, the National Guard requires a certain amount of time, depending on how many people we're looking to be able to bring on state active duty. So we want to make sure we decrease that reflex time to be able to engage those resources. So proactively, we may bring them up and stage them when there is absolutely no jurisdictional request for them. Because if we would get into a situation where a jurisdiction or a municipality would request them, it may be a number of hours until we can get them those resources, and we just want to decrease that time. So that's one of the tools or one of the mechanisms we use to be able to shorten that time frame from a resource request until we can get the resources there.
And have you reached out to any partners, if I may use that term, in terms of, I mean, you made a public appeal here for people to exercise safety and respect, and I was just curious, because you mentioned when we were talking about your other work and efforts in, reforming criminal justice and so forth, I was curious if you have reached out to any other people that could speak to specific communities and say, keep it safe today, that sort of thing. I was thinking of people like Meek Mill.
I have not reached out, no. But I mean, my hope is, as I said, today was an appeal to all Pennsylvania, 13 million Pennsylvanians, Meek Mill's one.
And I'm just asking if you have reached out to folks, whether they be government officials like a Dwight Evans or celebrities like a Meek Mill, or just to see if they can speak to audiences.
I have not
Okay.
yet. Anything else?
Just
All right.
one more for Director Pat.
Yes, Randy?
There were reports, I know it wasn't on the same scale as Philly by any means, but there were some reports of damaged property in Erie last night. Was that on your radar at all? Am I making that up? And would they maybe be looped in other jurisdictions where there's?
We were monitoring the protests that we were aware of across the state. I don't have any specific information regarding Erie, but I can definitely check and we can get back in. So some of the, we monitor a number of different networks and systems. So we watch our situational awareness section, we'll watch usually open source media. We take a look at social media and what people are posting, those types of things. And then we have a crisis management system that actually the counties report in. So we'll go back and take a look, but I'm not acutely aware of anything specific in Erie, but not saying that there wasn't some damage.
And to that point, I mean, this is the kind of thing that can quickly be expanded to rope in other municipalities that experience.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
We normally rope in every.
Yeah, we have our Commonwealth Watch and Warning Center, which is staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There are reporting requirements for all the counties in their 911 center. So that's how we receive information. And really one of the core functions of our agency is a 24/7 common operating picture across the state. So the counties will report incidents in. Depending on the level of the incident, we make other notifications to other state agencies that need to be aware of that. And sometimes that's just for awareness, or sometimes that, in case of last night, is action, where we're bringing in agency representatives from other agencies to be able to assist in planning for what we're executing today.
Is there any dollar, I mean, this may be happening more at the local level, but, sometimes when we have flooding or something, you guys work up numbers for disaster assistance. I was just wondering, is that in the cards for places like Center City, Philadelphia, that suffered a lot of property damage? And do you have any assessment of dollar damage from the rioting and looting last night?
We do not as of yet. That is usually an ongoing process, though, and that is normally what we do for any type of situation. So we'll be working with Philadelphia to be able to ascertain a dollar amount, and then to be able to really take a look at recovery operations and any funding that is available to be able to help. And there are a lot of complexities to that, obviously, whether insurance is involved and to what degree, and we work with the federal government, Small Business Administration, to be able to affect loans, those types of things. So we'll be taking a look at the spectrum, and usually that information isn't immediately available. We'll have some round estimates, but it usually takes a number of days to be able to get those estimates and refine them.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much.